Welcome to Q1 of 2024. I can't believe 3 months have passed since we did this last time, but we're here with the Star Wars CCG market update. We do these once a quarter to try to provide a little bit of price transparency. So everything we reference, all the numbers and spreadsheets are all in the show notes. So if you want to make a purchase, you want to know if you're getting a good price, bad price, check out the averages. People have sat and done a lot of work, Luke, Greg, in spreadsheets, and their work should be appreciated. This is all about transparency. What are we seeing trend wise? But I think the 800-pound gorilla in the room is Star Wars Unlimited. So I thought we'd have a quick little discussion to get us rolling here on Star Wars Unlimited and what we think Star Wars Unlimited is going to do for a game like Star Wars CCG, which came out 20 years before. So I'll go first, and then we'll just kind of go Luke, Mark, and Greg. Mm-hmm. Thanks for hanging out, guys. I have to admit I bought a case of Star Wars Unlimited. And I had a lot of fun opening it. And I honestly think it is growing the CCG pie. I think there's more people that are just thinking about cards than there were 2-3 years ago. This is evidenced by Lorcana. This is evidenced by tons of indie games coming out on Kickstarter. And I think that this is honestly bringing more people in that maybe weren't into it. And I think generally speaking, it's sort of like all tides rise ships. Well, I don't know. I'm bad at idioms today. It's late, but rising tides. So that's my opinion. I have a kind of positive outlook that this is just getting more people generally thinking about like Star Wars cards, like, oh, what ones that actually have cool movie stills. But Luke, what do you think here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on that. I think as a collector, right? Like I never played Star Wars CCG, but I absolutely adored collecting. I think this is really hard in terms of trying to find Star Wars CCG stuff. Is like overwhelming on eBay. I think a lot of people have pointed this out. I'm all for more Star Wars collectibles. This is great. I do think just a couple of points about Unlimited. The art is interesting, but it's not like still frames like from Star Wars CCG that we have. And I also want to point out, like, as a collector, I loved the lore in Star Wars CCG, like the kind of top like summation of what's going on. And Unlimited has like a really basic version of that. So I'd be curious, like, if the diehard Star Wars collectors jump in on this. I will say, as someone who has looked like very frequently on eBay search results to like update our graded tracker and seal tracker, there is a lot of product out there. I put a little bit of like behind on our show notes on the last. It was released March 8th, and we're talking about 10 days later for this quarter 1 update. And there is like definitely a ton of product on eBay. So I'll be curious what it does for our market for Star Wars CCG and if it continues to grow Unlimited.
Yeah, I have one quick thought. I already saw the nerds swarming on the Star Wars Unlimited because I think the Leia leader card says it's like Leia Organa Echo Base General. They're like, she's not a general. She was not in a leadership position there. Like, this is so it's so interesting how delicate that balance is. Like, and so I already saw the conversations around that. I was like, oh, this feels pretty derivative or uninteresting, but whatever.
Well, Decipher was so much of it was completely like made up. Like they just like were like, this is now canon. Like we're just doing this
alien will be is like some guy's an anagram of his name of like their friend or girlfriend's name or something.
But we grew up with that, so it's canon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Mark, what do you think?
Well, like Luke said, it makes it a little more difficult if you're specifically looking for Star Wars CCG, but I think it's healthy, like you guys also said, just because there's more interest, and a lot of that interest in this now new Star Wars Unlimited does leak over to Star Wars CCG, so it's good. Sorry, CCG, so it's good in that aspect. And I think on the other hand, you can look at a couple of other games. If I recall, Digimon and Dragon Ball Z, I think they both had modern sets, and those both increased the interest in some of the vintage sets from around the same era of, those 90s CCGs, Digimon, and I think Dragon Ball Z both had card games around then. So I think it helped that as well. And yeah, for the Star Wars CCG market, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, Dragon Ball Z's had like 40 different card games. There's a new one every 4 years. All right, Greg, we'll wrap up, and then Greg's going to take us through his lovely spreadsheet. So Greg, bring us home here.
Yeah, I mean, nothing too crazy new to add. I think my thoughts were that, like, in the short term, it could potentially have a negative effect on the CCG market, just because people only have so much money to go around, and to the degree that there's a percentage of Decipher players that are going to get into Unlimited. that's going to potentially take away from what they're spending on the Decipher game. But I think in the long run, it could end up bringing more players in. I mean, this thing about like eBay, you search for Star CCG, it's filled with unlimited, you can't find your Decipher stuff. But that's also true of people who are searching for unlimited and have never played the Decipher game, right? Or, have played it when they were kids and haven't thought about it. And so potentially it can work both ways, and people rediscover or discover our game, right? In the course of looking for unlimited. So, yeah.
All right, well, let's get to the numbers here. Thanks for doing a cool deck, man. Like, this is,
yeah.
My God.
I'm gonna have to start getting it some like animated GIFs soon or something like that. Getting a little stale with the static slides. Okay. So big picture stuff is things are actually looking pretty good. The total sum of like all the set averages, that is, the average total sum of all the averages is up. It's up from the fourth quarter of last year to this quarter. It's also up just generally comparing the 2023 average to the first quarter of 2024. And the sales volume is also up. It's a bit early right now to just because we're in the middle of March, right? But first quarter of 2024 compared to last final quarter of 2023, sales volume is up quite a lot. And then, how it compares to, let's say, first quarter of last year sort of remains to be seen. And the averages are up about 14% on average. So, 14, 15% on average is actually quite strong. So things are looking pretty decent. Looking at things in a more fine-grained way, Premier, Hoff, Java's Palace, and Reflections 2 Premium are all about static in terms of their average prices. Death Star, Tatooine, and Reflections 3 Premium are all down. And the rest are up. There's quite a lot of sets that are up right now. Coruscant and Theater back up, and then a bunch of the other sets are up as well. Reflections 3, I'm like kind of surprised about how low it's getting. It's 300 something. I'd have to check, maybe 330 or something like that. But just given how well the singles still sell, I'm kind of shocked at how low the set is going for these days.
So this is really interesting to me that both sales volume and price on average is up, because it feels like Q4 of every year is, let me treat myself for a Christmas gift time, right? It's like, I'm going to splurge. So it's curious that wasn't the strongest, because I feel like historically for, a lot of collectibles, a lot of markets in general, Q4 is like the best quarter because of Christmas or the holidays.
Yeah, Q3's been pretty good. And again, with the sales volume up as well, we're not, this is not a matter of, small sample sizes and some outliers, right? So yeah, Tatooine was on a run for a while. So it's actually, it's been recently at the highest it's ever sold for. And so it's down a little bit. But Reflections 3 and Death Star are down a decent chunk. Although the Death Star 2 set, I think it's on the back of like one or two sample size of one or two. So, take that with a grain of salt. Moving on to some of the, or I don't know, anything to say about these, or should I go on to the singles?
I have one quick thought. It's just amazing the consistency which these goods move. Like, the fact that there is monthly sales for all of these sets is just kind of remarkable still. That like these goods do have some degree of liquidity, right? That there is movement in a market. To me, that's just a sign of health.
Yeah, especially, Premier through special edition sell at obviously much higher frequencies than the rest of them, but there's still a decent sample size, and some months better than others for some of these others. Premier and Dagobah have had a pretty good last couple months in terms of sales volume, and it's I never know like why a certain set suddenly just skyrockets in terms of sales volume, but there are definitely trends, and I always wonder what is the explanation for them, and I never know.
All right, let's see the ultra rares here.
So ultra rares, Palpatine is sitting pretty static, still doing well. Luke has dropped quite a bit. Is now down under 200 on average. And this is one where I'm really kind of like stumped at what the explanation is here. You know, Emperor Palpatine had been going up for quite a while and had matched Luke in that 220, 225 range. And Luke has just been kind of sliding recently and average of 185. And again, these sell, you know, quite a lot, right? So these are pretty large sample sizes I'm working with at least the DS2 ultra rares.
Does anyone have a theory here? I'd be curious to hear if people have theories. Mark, you always have ideas.
I do have ideas, but on this one, I'm not really sure. I'd almost wager, and again, I'm more of a collector, but from what I do know about playing, I know, like with Palpatines, isn't it used in decks where you want like 5 or 6 Palpatines, and I don't know if there's really the same thing with Luke. I feel like with Luke, with the virtual cards, there's some good substitutes for him, but from a collecting perspective, I don't know. I don't really quite understand that. And these are the non-foils, so the players would really like these probably more than the foils.
Yeah, I think the last virtual set had versions of this that weren't as good, but were free essentially. So I think that could be a factor.
But the PC did that for both. So now there's Destiny 6 virtual versions, right, of both.
Okay.
Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight, and Emperor Palpatine, or equivalent. And so yeah, that is one thing I thought. But then you'd expect to see in some drop in both, but it's only hitting Luke for some reason. So maybe there, if there's anyone out there that has any thoughts about this, if any players are have a sense of potentially differential impact of the two virtualizations, that would be interesting. But yeah. So that's the state of it. And yeah, I'd love to hear hypotheses if folks have them.
None.
Looking at the foil versions, the Ref 1 foils, Luke and Vader are both up about the same, 7%. So Luke is back up over 100 consistently. He had dropped for a little while. Vader is now inching his way back towards 150. So that's good to see on both fronts. The ultra rare foils, Luke has remained static at around 330. Lord Vader static around 150. Matt, you'll be happy to hear that Mara Jade is up a good 23% at $120 or so. And Palpatine is down a little bit, 5%, which is not that significant. But now what's really interesting is that the foil and the non-foil Palpatine, because the foil is doing so well, are now reasonably close together, whereas while the non-foil Luke is going down, the foil Luke has remained static and is now almost at 100% more than the non-foil Luke, whereas the EMPs are a bit closer together in price.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Mara Jade, I think, just has the most room to grow, especially if she sneaks into the Disney canon. I don't know. I just think that that's still a good, very playable card that is, I think earlier it was like $100, right? So it was like,
yeah, I think anytime she drops under 100, I think it's a fair bet she'll go up again, right? Because I think that's just massively undervalued. Any of these obviously would be massively undervalued at under 100. And so, when she dropped to like 80 or 90 a little while back, I thought it was reasonably confident she was going to go up again.
All right.
And then the Reflection 3 Ultra Rares, Quiggy looks like it's up quite a lot, but there's only been one sale in the last couple months. So this is a sample size of 300, but that was certainly a good sale to see. 3PO has remained static at 250. Darth Maul Apprentice down a little bit, but still averaging over 700. And no data on P59, right? So, small sample sizes on a couple of these Ref 3 foils. But no reason yet to think they're suffering, but I would like to see a few more sales to see how things kind of start averaging out on these. And then of course the last is the Coruscant and Theed AIs. These are total prices, not as a set, right? But the sum of the individual average prices, and they're roughly static up a tiny bit, right? So. I'd say of the singles, there isn't really much bad news other than that Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight that I'm just like kind of blanking on trying to understand. And generally speaking, with the sets, while there are a few sets that are down, generally the sets are up and sales volume is up. I should just quick note on Death Star 2. Death Star 2, with it going down, is now one of those sets where it starts being far more of a better proposition to sell that set. I mean, it's always been a better proposition to sell the ultra rares as singles, But with the set going down, and and a lot of reasonably priced singles in that set, it's now in that kind of Coruscant and Theed territory where it might not make sense to sell the set, and it might make a lot more sense to sell singles from that set, just given the set's going down, but the singles are not going down.
Yeah, the particularly challenging thing about Death Star 2 is there's 80 rares, right? Like, even if you're just pricing it at $4 a rare, like 4 times, like I guess there's 78 or actually no, there's 80 plus the 2 ultra rare. So it's just, like you're looking at the average rare price of like $5, $4.50. So it's just like pretty cheap, especially when you think there's like Flagship Executor, which is a $20 card, like Baron 10. Like there's plenty of these bigger cards in there. Like there's some stinkers, but in general, there's like
certainly, yeah. But there's a good number of like these $10 to $20 cards in that set, and then of course Lord Vader sells for a lot, the 2 ultra rares, and I think with maybe I don't, I haven't run the numbers, but I think a relatively small percentage of the rares might equal the sum total of what the set seems to be selling for, if on the back of a few sales. So like these could be outliers, and the set can shoot up again. It's hard to tell.
Cool. Is that all we got from you, Greg? All right, let's move on to our sealed and graded update. So Mark and Luke, take it away, guys.
All right, sounds good. So Luke, are we I'll do my stuff first then, it looks like.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, sounds good. All right, so yeah, here we have some sales data, and just as a note, Luke actually forwarded to some of us, there are many BGS sales today, so some of these numbers actually are already not quite completely accurate, because there was probably, I don't know, gosh, how many cards were there, Luke? Probably
I think it was like 60 plus BGS
60
that ended
plus
on the
cards,
day that we're recording this. I didn't get that in yet. Yeah.
Right. So there's quite a few cards today. So if you'll imagine the data points for Q1 of 2024, if you add about 50 to that, it might actually be a slight increase on Q4 of 2023 in terms of the just number of graded sales that have been tracked, maybe around 500 or so total there. And of course, we got green here because we're recording here on St. Patrick's Day. So had to be festive, right? I think last time we had Christmas colors for the holiday.
That's right.
But yeah, sales are roughly consistent with the previous trends. We kind of have a slight upward trend from 2022 onward, but in other words, pretty consistent though.
The coolest thing about this slide is just the precipitous gain that grading had from like 2021 to now, right? It just went from there was 7 sales to there's 700, or I guess 600 up there. So it's a pretty cool climb there. It's like almost logarithmic.
Yeah, well, it's been really interesting to see. Yeah, right. Like you said, just the change over time, where it's kind of a niche thing back in 2021 to 2022, and now it's just one other arm of the hobby. So it's been really nice to see that grow.
I would say, just in addition to that, like pretty much every Sunday you can count on minimum 10 to 20 graded single auctions ending. As someone who like looks at it pretty much every day, so yeah, it's definitely pretty strong in terms of sales.
All right, yeah, you can go to the next slide. It's something pretty similar.
Yep, you got it.
Yeah, it's all good, no worries. So this, instead of looking at the number of cards, this is looking at the total US dollars of the graded sales. So it's kind of a similar plot. And again, I'm not really sure how many sold today from those 60 cards, but you could probably add a little bit onto that Q4 2020, Q1 of 2024 there. And again, similar trend from 2021 till now, dollar kind of increasing a little bit, although maybe over the last few quarters, holding steady-ish, roughly around the $40,000 per quarter mark. So it's nice to see that growth over there. We'll see how things continue out from here on out. But either way, good to see some liquidity in the market, as you pointed out earlier, Matt. There's certainly a lot of activity going on here. I thought I'd break it down. It's a little bit difficult to read all the individual dots, but you can see some of the high points here. In particular, we had a Corellian Corvette foil, I think in January. Of course, one of the tournament foils, for those who don't know, pretty rare cards, highly sought after. So that's one of the ones around 1,200 there. There's a Han Solo, also an Leia Organa. You'll see those above the 1,000 mark. I believe those were sold privately in the Facebook graded group. If you viewers aren't in there yet and you like Star Wars CCG graded cards, a great place to join and get deals like that, because I believe both of those cards were private sales through that group from one of the members. And then of course we got some other names you might expect in the points that chose to got labeled by the algorithm. One that you'll see though that you might not have been expecting is that probe droid that sold in February, I believe it was, for $300 or $400. That was I believe a limited Hoth PSA 10 probe droid that many of us were following as that auction went out, and that was quite incredible. But yeah, quite a quarter for graded cards indeed, with some variety there.
I'll just also hop in and say, you can see on the, I guess a little bit more on the right, where it says there's failure at the cave. I think Matt's going to chime on this too, but that was an autographed Mark Hamill Dagobah card, just kind of random card that Mark Hamill autographed. I think went for like 900. So yeah, maybe autos are something that to watch in terms of the market.
Yeah, autographs are so fascinating because so many of these big name folks charge a lot of money. Like I think Mark Hamill charges over $700 if he even does a signing. So the value is hard to determine on some of these like living actors. Like I had a friend do a Harrison Ford signing. It was $1,000 for Harrison Ford to sign something. So it's just quite expensive to get this stuff signed today. You know, you got it signed 30 years ago. That's great. Or 20 years ago.
And here again, one other table that probably this will be greatly skewed by the results today, with about 60 BGS mostly sales. But just over the last quarter, most of the sales were primarily PSA 8s and PSA 9s. There was a little bit of fewer of the PSA 7s, about 59 of those. And then kind of in the next category, as far as frequency, were PSA 10s, BGS 9s, PSA 6s, and HGC 8s. And there was kind of everything else. But again, this table of the number of sales by grade is a little bit out of date, just purely due to one day. So that just tells you how fast the market can sometimes move. About 1 week out of the quarter could potentially throw out an entire table that was put together earlier today. So I think that's actually pretty cool that the table's already inaccurate.
Yeah, we will continue to update the graded spreadsheet, and you know, you'll be able to see those numbers. I'm sure we'll link to that in the show notes as well. If you want to see like the latest up-to-date stuff by the end of March, that'll be there.
Yeah, Luke's been really great. He's been on top of things. So that was just the auctions literally ended right before this.
Yeah, bad timing.
Yeah.
That'll be up. All right, is it my turn?
Yeah, your turn. Sealed and the new edition, which is uncut sheets, which we both have behind us.
All right, I love it. Yeah, so I'm gonna start off. Yeah, this is just comparing. I actually asked. I'd be curious for the viewers, like, what do you guys most find interesting? I asked Matt as running the show, like, should I compare quarter one of this year to last year, or quarter one to quarter four? And he was like, yeah, let's go year over year. So this is gonna be year over year data that we're gonna go through for sealed. But if you know the viewers are like, hey, we'd love to see actually more recent data, I can pull that as well. So here is the overview for quarter one 2023 versus 2024. Yeah, the average price is down in terms of this quarter so far, but the total volume is way up, like just far up at this point. It's like 50 sales, and that's we still have 14 days left in the month when I did this. So yeah, 62,000 or so, basically lots more volume than we saw last year at this time. That amount of volume, I think, is starting to drag prices down a little bit, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Yeah. I borrowed this. I asked Greg for this because I love this chart of up, down, and kind of, even. So this is averaging quarter one of this year versus quarter one of last year. The three sealed boxes that are up are Death Star 2, Hoth, and Jabba's Palace. And then Dagobah is basically identical. All the other ones are down. I'll go more specific data in a second, but I like the visual here. I did not include stuff like Feed or Coruscant. Those just so rarely appear. Matt let me know he actually made a private sale of Coruscant, but it's just not fair to compare a 1-to-1 as Greg was doing with his ultra rare Qui-Gon. There's just not enough. So these are the ones I have a little bit more data, at least 2 or so sales of seeing what's up, what's down. I'm curious, guys, looking at this. Anyone have any ideas why Hoth and Jabba's Palace in particular would be doing better than the others?
I have theories on Hoth. I'm not quite sure Jabba's Palace. Like Hoth, I know has a lot of. I know a lot of people who, when they played, they considered Hoth kind of the. I don't know if you call it the prime, but I think a lot of them very much enjoyed playing that. So maybe people who want like a box to keep might really like Hoth. But Jabba's Palace kind of escapes me as well. I don't really understand that one because Jabba's is one of those things where you get the packs and you're kind of like, it's just thrown in like in reflection. You just have extra Jabba cards. So yeah, I don't know.
I
One
think it
thing I
might
can
have to
say
do with.
about
Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
one thing I can say about Jabba's Palace, which is not going to answer your question, but it's also just doing well as a set. In my set tracker, it's at the highest it's ever been. It's averaging like $95 as a set, which, you know, some of you might remember the days of Jabba's Palace at like 40 or $50, whatever it was. And even up till recently, it was still like, you know, in the 70s. So yeah, I don't know either, but Jabba's Palace has been doing quite well in terms of set sales in the last 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, fascinating. Who knows? Okay, cool. Let's move on. This is breaking out that data line by line. So let me just walk you through this. Obviously, on the left side, you can see the actual sealed boxes. And I said if it was, you know, limited, these are all limited for now. Obviously, up till Cloud City, which doesn't have an unlimited version. The next column is quarter one of this year, 2024. Then you can see that comparison to 2023. And then I did the percentage change year over year. So comparing last year to this year, and is there a gain or you know, a reduction in here? And so in parentheses after, that's the actual total number of volumes. So let's just walk through Premier just as one example. I'm not going to do every single one, but for Premier Limited, we had 18 boxes sold, and this is not the starter decks. This is just booster boxes. 18 already as of March 16th, and they were average price of $328. Last year, throughout the entire first 3 months, it was 15 for $379, right? So if you do the percentage right, that's a reduction of 13.5% year over year. It's down. So that Hoth that we just talked about, this is on the back of just 2 sealed sales. Like that you can see that like last year there was 8 sales in quarter one, and now there's 2. So who knows if there were more sales, like maybe that would drag down, but for the moment it's quite strong. And then pretty much like the one that I thought was interesting, Death Star 2, I don't know, like the one from last year that we're comparing it to 1,000, like
It's hard with one data point because there
right,
could just been
one
like
data
someone
point.
put it up and then it would buy it now happened. They're like they undervalued
Exactly.
it, something.
Exactly. But, you know, right. So that's why I did want to include, like, you can see it's just 1-to-1, like Reflections 2 at the bottom. Sure, it's maybe down 35%, but is that actually reality? Like, there's just so infrequent. So the ones that I feel like are really good, you can see Premier, definitely Jabba's Palace, which, you know, isn't a major like improvement, but up 6.4% year over year. And then let me think here. Cloud City, right, is a pretty good one. I just feel like in general, Premier is probably like our most sold box. It's a pretty good look at what's the market like there. So yeah, aside from Hoth and Death Star 2 and Jabba's Palace, like stuff year over year looks like it's on the way down. Any thoughts on this, guys, before I move on?
Yeah, Premiere. I mean, I can understand why Premiere sells so much. It was also printed so much. Like I don't know if we have an idea of how many boxes of Premiere was printed, but it's in the hundreds of thousands, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just around. People find cases of it all the time. I think it's a little less common to find cases of other stuff. Tatooine's drop is like interesting because I'm looking at some of these prices. The averages. I'm like, would I buy any of this? Like, I might have bought an Endor box at $850. To be honest, I might have bought that for $850 myself. So like some of these, I'm like, I might have paid a little bit more for that.
Well, that or maybe they're private sales, right? The spreadsheet that we will link to like has all that information. Like if it's just blank on a sales note, that means it was, you know, from eBay. But lots of times, like you'll give a discount because it's private sale. You're trying to avoid those fees. Or sometimes the boxes are titled. Like I try to make a note if like the eBay title is really funky. Like for instance, there's a Reflections box that I kind of told the graded group that did not mention the term CCG anywhere or even box. It was like Star Wars Reflections. Like that was the name of the sealed box of Reflections, and I went for like 1,000. So it was a little bit under what it probably should have been valued. So trying to root those out is always like a interesting sort of investigative, you know, endeavor for me.
Yeah.
Okay. let's move on. So I want to talk a little bit more about some sort of smaller tiers. So I'm going to skip back to the Premier Limited, but I did think it was very interesting considering, wrapping back to our start of the conversation on just Star Wars Unlimited. We have a explosion of sales in Star Wars Unlimited boxes, like CCG boxes, not Star Wars Unlimited. Like, so last year at this time, there was one Star Wars CCG Unlimited booster box sold. Already there's been 10. So I don't know if that is piggybacking off of this at all. Like people getting excited about Unlimited. Hey, I have this box. Maybe that will be something searching for that, and whatever. So there's been some pretty high sales of that this quarter, but year over year, it's down about 4%. But again, you're comparing it to one data point from last year at this time. Then I also I think these are interesting. By far and away, the most sold box that isn't like just a booster box is the Premier Introductory 2-player, and then also the Hoth, the Empire Strikes Back 2-player. So sometimes people are like, they find these like, how much is this worth? Yeah, Premier Introductory is like 35 on average, and Empire Strikes Back is about 52. That obviously doesn't include stuff like Japanese. There's a couple of those sold for much higher. But the last thing I wanted to point out here is the anthologies are okay, like pretty much like either even or up, with the exception of third anthology. Explosion of that. And that's pretty good data too. Last year at this time, at the bottom of that, you can see 6 actual sales versus 5 already this year. So 34% increase in growth year over year, which I thought was interesting as well.
I love the idea of a bunch of people thinking they're buying boxes of the new Star Wars Unlimited game, and then they get this like old game from 1995.
What is this?
You get this unplayable 60 random cards that are yeah, it was quite criminal that the starter deck in 95 was allowed to be called a starter deck, when it was just like, these are not the cards you'll need to play this game. Right? It's just like 60 random cards and two rares in there.
And we are seeing as well, like a ton more starter decks in general, right? Up. So 4 last year versus 12 this year. It's partly, I wonder how much of this too is like being so on the ball with like looking these up. Like this is one of my, as the kids go to sleep at night, like I look each day and see, okay, where are we at? What have we added? So was there only 4 sales last year? I tried to go back on eBay and look. Like you can now go back 3 years in history and see, but yeah, up above, like just the starter decks themselves, the limited starter decks up 16%. So yeah, thought that was interesting as well. Kind of all over the map in terms of the smaller tier stuff. All right. And then last thing I just wanted to talk a little bit about, I told Matt this would be 15 seconds. So you guys know I love uncut sheets. I'm maybe one of like 10 people in the world that are really into this. I just wanted to plug that I made a tracker for this as well. And this isn't updated very frequently because the first data point, or the first point up there, is like, eBay has these uncut sheets that are really, easy to find. And my idea was like, what about the ones that are not easy to find? Like, how much are those going for? And the answer is a fair amount. So just so like you all know, like market wise, I shared with a few people behind the scenes, like some of the uncut sheets that I purchased and like have also like sort of resold have definitely gone for like thousands of dollars. There definitely is a market for uncut sheets, especially if they're not any of the ones that are listed up in 0.1 there. So if you have a rare uncut sheet that's not listed, and Matt and I were kind of commenting together too recently, like kind of maybe since we made those videos, or that might have had some relationship. We just saw a lot more posts recently in the groups of like, hey, I have this available. How much this is going for? So yeah, I thought I'd give a little shout out that that market is there. And yeah, still going.
Cool. Thanks so much, Luke. We're going to come back. I got a few discussion questions to close out the show. The first one I wanted to ask the group, and feel free to chime in, whoever has thoughts here, but I guess I'll start, is, do you see any macro trends kind of taking off in 2024? I see a lot more people concentrating their collections on high-end stuff, right? So right now in the CCG, TCG market, you see, enchanteds or ultra rares, these like big chase cards are playing a bigger role in collecting than at any point before, right? Like everyone's going after Lorcana's Enchanted, or the hyperspace treatment, or showcase treatment in Star Wars, whatever words. But I can see like this maybe coming over into Star Wars CCG, where people are just like, I just want the ultra rares. I don't want the other 96 cards and Reflections 3. I just want the 4 ultra rares. I want 3 of them or 4 of them. So I could just kind of see this hyper collectability creeping into this hobby where you see high-end cards go up and then everything else kind of remains static or go down. So that's like my hot take on a maybe macro trend for the rest of the year.
We do see that. I should jump in and say, like, with PSA 10s, like any PSA 10 is going to be worth a fair amount of money, even if it's like a common. Like just earlier today, some like common and New Hope cards went for $50, like PSA 10. And Mark shouted out the Probe Droid, like a common Probe Droid limited Hoth PSA 10 went for $300. Like, so if you talk about like the ultra, very, very hard, like if you don't know like anything about graded market, like Star Wars CCG PSA 10 is a very challenging thing, especially if it's foil. So that goes to speak to your point.
Yeah. This game just doesn't grade super well. I mean, Mark knows this because he's graded probably more cards than anyone else here, but
yeah,
there can be some real misses.
Yeah. I think there is a demand also for like random, I mean, I say random, but just cards that are not a little bit off the beaten path. Like people have seen pretty much every main now at this point in 2024. So when you see something like, I don't know, a Probe Droid or a Seeker or something that's kind of like, why would someone grade one of those? It tends to draw interest just because it's so like, I haven't seen that before. So it's funny, you'll see this like random card fetch a higher price than like a main character card that, you think like, well, main character card's probably actually worth more, but people just want to see some variety. So I think that we'll see that continue to happen, that people just want to see something new.
Also, the population's much smaller too, right? Because there's
top
no one's
one,
trading
right?
Top one.
One other trend I think we're going to see accelerate a little bit is just the solidification that if you don't at least get an 8, really a 9 in grading, you might as well crack it, right? Because I think that 8 is basically raw, and except there's no appeal to players because you can't play with graded cards. So I think you're going to see this trend that people really only want 9s and 10s. Like even for my own collection, like I only want a 9 or 10. Really, I just want a 10 at this point. Like I don't even have much of interest in like a 9. So I think that this move towards ultra premium stuff is going to continue.
Yeah, I think there's enough, like as of right now in the current state of the market, there's enough current collectors that, pretty much like 8s, it's not hard to get an 8 at all. So they're almost more like if you just want something in a slab, but yeah, like maybe you're getting it even cheaper than the cost of like the sets versus the individual cards. It's kind of like that, it's cheaper than the cost of the grading plus the card just to get your foot in the door.
Absolutely. Any kind of final thoughts here? I got a few more questions for you guys to think about. All right. The next thing I wanted to ask is if someone's coming into this game, maybe they accidentally found it on eBay with Star Wars Unlimited in 2024. Do you have any recommendations on how to get in there and what to collect first? I think you're going to see this question because people are like, oh, this game. Well, how do I do this game? Very good question. I feel like I've said this before, get sets, but I'd be curious for other people to have like what to tell that person who stumbles into this hobby or finds this video and made it to minute 38 somehow of us droning on. Does anyone have any suggestions for that person?
I mean, I certainly have ideas. I mean, it depends. Like, are you talking collecting or playing? Because if it's playing, GEMP or GEMP, depending on how you want to say it, is great just because it's free and there's people there and they're really, if you say you want to play, there are people that'll help you out. So it's very helpful in that sense. But from a collecting perspective, I mean, it's easy to see things on eBay. I know people sometimes can be antisocial, so they don't want to go on like the Facebook groups and like talk to people. But if you want to get like something nice and kind of inexpensive for what you're getting, does Wild Thing Games still have that VRF sets, the very rare foil sets where you can get like, I don't know,
I think you bought them all
for like $40 or whatever it is. It's pretty good bang for your buck, and you get a lot of nice looking cards that have lots of, a few main character cards even. So I think it's a great deal to start off with for collecting.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Mark. It really depends on like what the person's interested in. Are they interested in playing? Are they interested in collecting? If they're interested in playing, are they looking to just, get a couple decks built and then test the waters? Are they looking to get enough cards so that they can like make, whatever deck they want, right? And it's so hard to really give advice about how to go about collecting because it really depends on what your collecting interests are, and that can lead you in a couple different directions.
So you kind of bring up something I've been thinking a lot about. I wonder how much there is for a market of pre-made decks, right? Like these are Battle of Hoth, two decks play against each other. The singles add up to $50, but could you sell it for 75? I just, as someone who came back into it, like I probably would have been interested in a product like that at one point, right? Just like ready to go decks that someone pulled all the cards and locations and stuff. So just a thought there if anyone's feeling like they have way too much free time.
I mean, I know there are a couple sellers out there that have pre-made decks that they put together, but I haven't looked at the deck list, so I can't speak to their quality. And I don't know if the PC still they put out the demo decks that they have. I haven't looked at them in a while, but I was getting back into the game. But I mean, I agree. I think those kinds of things would be nice. And then depending on the kind of player, having like a Decipher only deck, and with some of these like Hoth battle environments, but also some of the newer PC decks as well. Right. So is this a player that's entirely new, or is this a player that's coming back? Right. That might make a difference for the kind of deck they'd be interested in playing.
Yeah, I think that the struggle people always have with virtual cards is people just want tactile experiences, and it feels like you're cheating the system by printing it off and putting it in front of an existing card, which I totally get. That's how the game stays alive. But I think that there's just so many people that I've talked to, like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like my printer's out of ink. Everyone's printer's out of ink, right? At this point, it's a global issue. Everyone's printer's out of ink. Okay, let's move on to sort of our final question here. We've had a lot of new Disney IP. Ahsoka came out last year, and I think that this stuff at this point has had zero impact on the market. Basically, the big impacts of maybe the Mandalorian, like the people that got re-engaged in Star Wars due to shows are already part of the community. No one saw Ahsoka and was like, I'm thinking about like Star Wars cards again. That happened with like the Mandalorian. That happened with like this sort of initial tranche of shows that came up. They got people kind of like interested and engaged, and then they just stayed along, right? They didn't just come back because of Book of Boba Fett, right? Like, so I think that the Disney stuff has no impact at all at this point, because anyone that would have been impacted has already sort of like, oh yeah, this is cool, I'm going to get back into this. But I'd be curious if other people have thoughts. Did anyone like Ahsoka? I liked Ahsoka.
I thought it was pretty good. I liked it. Yeah, I mean, I think the nice thing about I think that you're correct that there's no like acute events, so to say. It's not like the show comes out and you immediately see a spike in sales or a spike in interest. It's more of a continuous, like there's continually IP or shows being generated for the IP, which keeps interest constant, as opposed to maybe other like I use the example of, say, Star Trek. Maybe I'm a little biased against it, but it feels like Star Trek was another game that was also very popular. In fact, I think the prices were even higher in the 90s, but the IP just hasn't quite had the development over the years like Star Wars has. So maybe over time it's not doing quite as well as Star Wars. So I think it's good for the long-term health. And yeah, we don't see it's not like the Logan Paul with Pokemon a few years ago, but where it's like a big jump all of a sudden, just more of a continuous, hopefully healthy growth and steadiness of the market.
Yeah, Star Trek's a really interesting parallel to draw, because I feel like that franchise has been a little mismanaged over the last 15 years. So I hear Picard is very good, for example, but nobody has Paramount Plus. Nobody on the planet has Paramount Plus to watch Picard. And it doesn't matter how good it is if it's on the 7th most popular streaming platform, right? Like, it's just not going to get out there and engage people, because that's what Paramount Plus is. It's like number 7. It might be number 9 even. If there's a Paramount executive watching this, please correct me. Like, actually, we're number 6 after Netflix.
You've got the CEO of Paramount Plus leaving comments in your.
Please, please. Actually, I would like to be hired. Any kind of final thoughts here as we wrap up?
I don't have any. I don't know what this would do with respect to your question, but one thing to note is there hasn't been a new movie in a while. Because the focus has been on shows these last couple of years, and in light of whatever was going on at the movies. But it would be interesting to see what happens next time there is a new film that comes out, whether that has a kind of differential impact that the shows have not had.
Yeah, there's even these like little micro events. For example, I saw at my local theater that they're remastering episode 1, and it's coming back out in May. I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. Maybe I might pay $12 for this. But I love episode 1. Yeah, I think I know they're working on a new generation of movies. I actually think for the health of the franchise long term, the more they can get into shows that are like Andor, which don't necessarily have to be reliant on Jedis and the Force, but are just building on this really interesting universe. I think that is better for the franchise long term. Obviously, I love the Force, Jedi, all these things, but I think the more interesting things to explore are like, what are you smuggling? I don't know, just like the interactions and the sort of micro societies that exist within this like huge galaxy. That's like fascinating. Okay, that's all I have. Do you guys have any final thoughts here as we wrap up Q1? Happy St. Patrick's Day. Thanks for wearing green, Mark.
Good job, Mark.
Gotta celebrate my Irish heritage here, so you know, had to do what I had to do.
Nice.
I wore green, but it's like a forest green, and I did it by accident. So
that's the wrong green. That's brown. You're wearing brown, Greg. We'll be back next quarter. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm sure you do that if you made it this point. So, but we'll catch everybody next time. And thanks for hanging, guys.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, folks.